Ladies and gentlemen of Exeter and the surrounding communities, we are excited. Well, I guess one way we're thankful that you gave us last year off, but we really didn't want it off. We wanted to be here playing for you. So after 174 years of this band being together, this will be our 173rd playing for you. The band was formed in 1847. And we are excited to open our 2021 season for you. Welcome guests, welcome friends and family. We hope you enjoy tonight's show. And Fire Chief Eric Wilkin, if you could turn the AC up a little bit for us. Let's just say, guys think it's warm down there. You should be up here in the cockpit. This is awesome. Love you. Enjoy the show.
We have the reputation as being the oldest continuously performing band, and when they celebrated their 100th anniversary in 1947, they made a big deal about the fact that they were the oldest continuous band. And a few years ago, I think it was in 2020, during the pandemic, we were asked, are we sure about that? What did they do during World War II? Because we see that funding for the band stops being a town-funded event in the 1940s. So we were trying to figure out whether or not they performed. So what we did was we just went through the Exeter newsletter, our local newspaper, to make sure that they performed. And in 1945, they did one performance that summer. So we'll call it. And they were the most continuously performing until 2020. And that was the year of the pandemic, and they could not meet in 2020. They were back again in 2021. 1847. There was a movement across the country for local bands. It was seen as a very wholesome kind of entertainment. It kept people busy. It was also encouraged particularly among factory workers to learn how to play an instrument. You didn't have to be great at it. And a lot of these instruments, you didn't have to be a real maestro or anything. And so they encouraged brass bands. This one originally organized under the name the Piscataqua Band, and by the 1860s it had changed its name to the Exeter Cornet Band, and that's what it was, I think, through the 1890s. In the 1890s they changed the name to the Exeter Brass Band. Primary instrument was a cornet. They were all brass instruments. Flutes go back and forth between woodwinds, but that was probably just a common name at the time to call it a cornet band. They were a marching band back then, and they don't march anymore, but they did up until, I would say probably the 1940s or so. They were still a marching band, but now they're more of a concert band. But remember, this is before there's any kind of reproducible music, so there isn't even a Victrola back in 1847. So the way to hear music was to have somebody in your family that could play an instrument like a piano, or to sing, or the man in the downtown shop who was whistling a new tune. Everybody would want to know, where'd you get that tune from? Maybe he heard it at a concert in another town. So it was really, live music was the way to go. Otherwise you had no way of listening to music. The other entertainment in town might be something that involved a lot of liquor. There were billiard halls downtown, there was some bowling, there were baseball games that sometimes would just descend into absolute chaos if it was two competing towns especially, they might start a fight. So a wholesome entertainment was something you could bring your mother and your sister or your sweetheart to. So I think that's why they thought of it as wholesome. It's sometime around the Civil War that they changed their name to the Exeter Cornet Band, and they also changed their uniforms and began wearing uniforms that looked slightly more military, like they might have seen during the Civil War. And at that time they would perform for all sorts of events. Home days, town days, they performed in, we had so many parades back then, so it was very common for there to be a parade for Memorial Day. There would be a parade for the 4th of July. All of these events they would appear at, and they would march during those time periods. Especially the 4th of July, which was a very rowdy kind of event every year. They'd start firing off cannons and firecrackers at about midnight too. A lot of kids got involved in this, mostly boys. So it could be dangerous as well, because there were usually injuries that could happen. So people were awakened in the middle of the night with all the crazy chaos that went on the 4th of July. And it didn't ease up most of the day. Of course, it's hot on the 4th of July, so it was just a tough time for everyone. And you know, a lot of animals would be upset by all the noise as well. It's much more controlled now. And there was also frequently a parade that was held early in the day, usually quite early in the morning, called the Parade of Horribles. And this allowed a lot of the downtown merchants and the men of the town to dress up in these hobo costumes and just make appalling amounts of noise, and they competed for who could be the most horrible. I wish we had photos of these events because I think they'd be great to see. But the Ancients and Horribles was a common type of parade that was held during that time. So 4th of July was nuts. Post-Civil War, it becomes more active, I think, in town events, as people requested having the band for events, might be a high school graduation or whatever. They changed their name in the 1890s to the Exeter Brass Band. The band also performed at different locations back then. There were some concerts that were held in the center of town in the old wooden bandstand, which was temporary bandstand. They would just haul it there in the summertime and place it there, and the rest of the year they would move it to other locations. But we know they also had some band concerts out on Park Street Commons at times, so you'd see it there. They were playing once out at Hampton Beach in 1898 for a July 4th concert, I think, and a tremendous windstorm came through. We think it was a wind shear, knocked down the building they were in. It was a horrible tragedy. But the Exeter Brass Band was performing there at the time, so we know that that was one of their movements at that time. And then as the turn of the century came, you had the First World War, and when that ends, there's a big concert in the downtown. The night that the war ended, that was a very exciting moment, so you'd see the band there as well.
Tonight's brass band is under the direction of Michelle Boulanger from Dover, New Hampshire. We're celebrating Michelle's 47th anniversary with the Exeter Brass Band.
My name is Michelle Boulanger, and I have played in the Exeter Brass Band since I was 20, so that would be 1974. And the only reason I got to finally play with them was they weren't going to admit women. And my former band director kind of broke that ceiling when she came over and played trumpet. She also lived in Dover. And another band director of mine, I had come over to the Exeter concerts, believe it or not, to babysit the children of my first band director. He had 3 boys, and he and his wife both played in the band. And so his wife was one of the other women who broke the ceiling. But I came over and sat in the truck and babysat the boys when I was a very young teenager, freshman and sophomore in high school. Had the chance, because of my spouse being in the Coast Guard, we lived in Hampton for a while. And Hampton is next door to Exeter. And I thought, ooh, now's my chance. So I did come over at the beginning of the summer season that year of 1974. And they said, oh, trombone player? Sure, we need trombone players. So I got a chance to start playing, and I've been playing ever since. And when my kids got to the age where they were playing pretty adequately, they came too, so it was a family thing. And about 5 years ago, I think, Chick McDougal called me up and said, well, we need a conductor because the other guy can't do it anymore. And I said, wow. And in the meantime, I'd gotten 2 degrees in music education. I had taught in Rochester. I had the music director job at Dover High School for 31 years. And so could step into the conductor job pretty handily. Was very familiar with the repertoire. I'd been playing it for all those years. And I've been the conductor ever since.
My name is Dave Emanuel. I will be your announcer for the evening.
I've been playing with the brass band since the season in 1997 when I got out of UNH, and I was looking for things to do, and I had a really good friend who said, let's go play in the brass band. So we made a few phone calls, and I'd gone to high school with Maureen Curran, and her dad was running the brass band. He said, sure, we'll take an able-bodied trumpet player. And I never looked back. I'm still playing with it and I love it every Monday night we play. When the first few years I played, the first 10 years, the first 20 years, the first 15 years I played with the brass band, I was playing with a guy from Amesbury and Newburyport who had taught high school with my grandfather years ago. So they knew all of my relatives from Amesbury. And why is that important? That's important because when I first started playing here, my grandparents always came down, and it was really neat to be able to play for them every Monday night. So to be able to sit next to a guy who grew up or who taught in the public education with my grandfather was a really special thing to me. And that transcends into music because these guys, they played with all the big bands when everybody who was anybody would go to Hampton Beach or the Ballroom or wherever the big band was playing because that's what they did on Friday and Saturday nights. Everyone would go out and dance. So to go back in time and learn how to play the phrasing or feel the swing or learn from these musicians that played the music in the day because that's what popular entertainment was. I really view that as a gift, and I really cherish that. It's been really cool for me. And I'm trying to, my kids have been coming to brass band concerts since they were born. They know that every Monday night in July, they go catch the first part of the set, whether it was in a car seat, a stroller. Now they come and they pass out waters before the show and make sure that everyone can get up and down the stairs and everyone has what they need. And I look at that as just part of how we contribute to the next generation of musicians, participants, or just being involved in the community. I know that we usually have a good population of seniors, and as well as down to little kids. We have full spectrum. I just try to make sure they have a good show. And in the past several years, I've been able to help the band as being the announcer since Joe Allaher retired from. Joe's the Newburyport guy, the lead trumpet player I'm speaking of. When Joe stepped down, I have been able to keep the microphone lively since he left, and just to be able to connect with people, whether somebody's having a birthday or the fire chief's in the house, different people, the local personalities, to be able to call people out and say thanks for the request, or we're happy to be able to play this for you, or whoever it is in the house, just to make the personal connection. And our director, Michelle Boulanger, works hard to provide a little bit of history or some nuggets about each of the pieces we're playing to connect it with where the music came from and how it's been carried through multiple generations of the band or how it relates to pop culture in the day.
Okay, thank you for your indulgence while we enjoyed that passing breeze. It cooled off the bandstand for like 3 breaths. I know. Thank you, guys. We enjoyed it as well. For any of you who know our conductor, Michelle, she is a huge fan of John Williams and his movie scores. From the orchestration of Fiddler on the Roof, for score he did in 1971 film, which he won his first Oscar in 1972, to Star Wars, The Force Awakens in 2015. This arrangement we're about to play by Michael Sweeney includes Williams themes from Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Enjoy great movie adventures.
It depended on the conductor, absolutely. I mean, Exeter Brass Band had, like I said, files and files of music. So conductors could come in here and dip into that. And some conductors would change the folders every year, so it was, a brand new batch of music. Some conductors just let them be and stuck new pieces in.
Probably came to a point where it almost would have petered out in like the 1950s and 60s, because it wasn't the most popular type of music. New music was coming in, as you said, and the band kind of took a stand saying that they weren't going to play that new music. Now, when you hear the band, they will play the Beatles. They play a lot of show tunes now, not just marching music, but they play a lot of show tunes, things that people will recognize. So they keep up with it, but there was a time, I think, when I think I read it out in the archives, where they were not going to play any of that rock and roll music. What that meant was that they were going to lose players. The players are drawn from all over. They're not necessarily people from Exeter. They're people who play in other bands and other locations. And musicians, people who played a musical instrument in high school, and then they maybe left, went off to work, or went off to college, and they didn't pick it up again, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what, I think I want to try that again. And so there are some Exeter high school players and other high schools in the area that'll send graduates who will come and play. But now I think they play a wide variety of music. If you talk to the current conductor, I'm sure they'll give you more info on it.
But for a town band concert, I think we play what people expect to hear. So marches and pop tunes and Broadway stuff and folk songs. And I'm old enough now, so things that I think were great in my 20s and 30s, I have to realize that those are really old now. People might not want to hear those, but you have to decide. That's the fun of being the conductor, is I get to decide, and I have to map out 5 programs over the summer. And yes, the first program can be patriotic, because it's going to be right around the 4th of July. And then we go on. And the last concert of the year, I got in the habit of making it the musician's choice. So at whatever people it's their favorite piece of music to play, we'll put that in the last concert of the year.
So I think yes, there was a time period when the band was kind of petering out, where they had a hard time getting players. I think the audience was generally there. Sometimes it was an older audience. There was a level of nostalgia about the band. We feel old-timey. And it does feel kind of old-timey when you're sitting out there. I mean, it's summertime, it's hot, the sun is starting to set, the birds fly home over from the river. It's really beautiful to be out there. But it does have that feel like I am living in another century.
Music classes start in 4th or 5th grade, or at the time, I think they still do at the Lincoln Street School, or maybe even Main Street School. I don't remember. But I had played for a number of years, and I had to borrow the school piccolo in order to play. One of the at the time, and this was probably beforehand, we actually practiced before the summer started. So the Novak room was set up with chairs and music, and you brought your own music stand, and we practiced under the aegis of Joe Curran, who organized it. And we had the same conductor come every summer for a long, long time. I forget his name. It was Jack. I knew him as Jack. The equipment and the music was stored for the band upstairs here in the town hall in its own little room, which I believe is now the TV studio. That was an interesting place. There was the bass drum that Chick McDougall played all the time and every year, and he's so funny. and he always had some kind of joke to introduce each other, get us to all working together as one group, and because the people in the band came from all the surrounding towns.
I think Chick left some big shoes to fill as far as passion from growing up in Exeter, living in Exeter, being Exeter. Chick McDougall was the person. And, the past, 8 or 10 years, he's always like, David, I got to make sure you can do this. David, make sure you do this. We got to make sure we're good. And I always say, Chick, whatever I can do to make sure that this tradition is passed along, you have my commitment to that.
He was an awesome man. I can remember him because he was a contractor, a builder, and he would go into my father's place, Wentworth Lumber, and so I've known him forever and ever since I was a little kid. But he was always the one that would help somebody out. He was always the one that could talk forever, and sometimes you'd have to talk as you're going out the door and say, hey, Chicky, see ya. But he could always have a conversation with you. And in later years when I'd be out walking or something, it was great to run into Chicky because you'd hear what's going on in his life and everybody else's life too. He was just an awesome, awesome man. He sang in a group they have over Sterling Hill, do ukuleles and singing, and his friend Flossie would bring him every Tuesday night. And he had a very good voice, a very deep voice and a very good voice. And he was also very funny. And all the women loved him. They loved him. And towards the end of it, he couldn't find his songs, so I'd find them for him. And when he'd get too loud, I'd have to go like that to him. And I'd have to point sometimes to where the song was starting because he didn't know that. His hearing was going and his sight was going. So I helped him out with that. And every Tuesday night, I hear people say, we miss Chicky so much. And I really miss Chicky. He was great.
Oh, God, Chick. Chick was such a nice guy, and of course I'm sitting in the back row, so I'm kind of like right near him. And so it's usually the trombones, the tubas, and then the drums. So, and he was so funny. And then Mrs. Carville played drums for years and years and years, probably the first 40 years that I was in the band. And she and Chick were just a comedy team. So, and they were very good at what they did, but they were so much fun to listen to in the back of the band. And once I became conductor, he started telling me more stories, like how he started out, and nobody really ever taught him, but I think he said he started out on trumpet or cornet. Somehow he ended up playing bass drum. So as long as I've known him, he's played bass drum. Just a wonderful, warm, funny man. But he's the one who called me every year once I started being the conductor. So when his son called a couple weeks ago to say that he was in hospice, I saw on my phone, McDougall, and I know he'd been living with his son. So I was, picking it up, expecting to hear him saying, Michelle, you're ready to start the year. And it was his son saying he wasn't doing well.
Let's see, Chick, we had Mrs. Edgerly that played the snare drum for 40 years, for a very long time. She was great, and she and Chick had a bond because they were the two percussionists. Chick would get on the bandstand, one of the first ones, because he sat in the way back, and he would tighten up the drum heads so that they would, you loosen them so they don't break during the week off or due to temperature or something like that. So he'd be cranking all the things around the bass drum and making his puns and jokes and get everyone laughing, and bang the drum and make sure it was correct. And he just loved it. And you could see it when you saw him play and when you saw him interacting with people. And there apparently were jokes happening in that back row that never made it to the front, because I sat in the front with my flute and the lower brass instruments, and the percussion were in the back. So something was going on back there. I don't know what, but I'm sure he let it. When we were finishing up, instead of waiting to get out on the steps, he would sometimes climb over the rail and jump down onto Water Street so he could get his drum packed and get on home.
No, Chick was consistently, he always communicated with us. We didn't really have too many stories with Chick, but Chick was always the heart and soul and really the drum beat of the band, and he will be sorely missed, and they will hopefully keep on his tradition.
Chick's story. There was one time when Chick was a volunteer firefighter. And you're right in the middle of town, and the fire station and the trucks come around. Well, there was one time we were playing a concert, and the alarm went, and the trucks were going somewhere, and a truck pulls around to the back of the bandstand, and he goes, "Come on, Chick, you gotta come!" Chick climbs over the back railing and got on the fire truck and went off. And we all just looked and went, there you go.
There have been a number of people over the years, really kind of charismatic people who were either the head of the band or played in the band. Chick McDougall was one of them. He was amazing. He knew every story about the band, and he would annually come in July and say to me, or June, and say to me, "Is there something you can put in the newspaper about the band so we can get people to show up?" And of course, people always show up. So every year I felt I was like running a newspaper photo of the band in its earlier iterations. Bob Curran was another person who was very involved in the band. He was its, I think, treasurer, manager, something like that. He was involved in it. Going back, there's a man named Swain who was involved in the band. There's a lot of people going all the way back. And then there's Henry Shute, of course, who wrote the books. He wrote the book, The Country Band, which is kind of a funny book about trying to play in the band. His book's about his childhood. He always says that all he wants to do is play a B-flat clarinet in the Exeter Brass Band, and he grew up to do just that. So that was an important part of his stories about wanting to play an instrument so he could be in the band. So those are all fun stories. He wrote a series of books called Real Diary of a Real Boy. Talks about when he was a boy. He lived on Court Street, and he would lay in bed at night and listen to the band rehearsing. So they were over on Court Street rehearsing, probably over by what today is the rec department in that area. And they rehearsed there, and at some point they moved to the town hall. I'm not sure when, but they did. That's helpful. When we went in there were stacks and stacks and stacks of old music that we couldn't take because we didn't have enough room for it. But it was just, the room was just packed with all the different parts of music for all the different instruments, many, many different pieces of music. When John Philip Sousa becomes popular, marching band music really takes off. I think it's about the 1890s.
Things like the typewriter and Blue Tango. There's a million Leroy Anderson titles that are always great for band, and everybody loves them. So we've got a bunch. There's another guy named Harold L. Walters, and I don't really know a lot of his background, but he wrote a lot of band music, but there's a couple of titles we have. One of them is called Country Western, one of them is called Hootenanny, and all they are is just medleys of folk songs, but the audience loves that.
And so they began to play a lot of Sousa music. There was a specific piece of music that was written just for Exeter. I'm still researching that. I'll have more on that in July.
Yeah, do you have the full march, or was it just that? Because
I have copies of it. I can show you after.
yeah, because I could possibly bring that back into a useful form,
Okay.
and we could play it. Yeah.
Story of the Exeter Grand March, and I wrote it wrong, like some of you knew I wrote the Grand Exeter March. The Exeter Grand March was given to us by a lady at the Historical Society who found it and thought it would be a fun thing for us to do. And I brought the original parts. You're welcome to come and look at them and see how much fun it would have been to actually try to read them.
He was the joyful spirit of the Exeter Brass Band, and still is. In his honor, we're performing this traditional march which have been found in the band archives called the Grand Exeter March. It was written in 1850 by Nathan Barker, a local musician and a professor of music.
just say, come down to the concerts. It's a great time. And it's free, and the band it's playing in recent years has been excellent. So that's fun too. The sound system is good. You can hear them really well. I once recorded whole songs from them, and we reproduced them later. So that comes out real nice. And you get to look at our beautiful, beautiful bandstand, which is correctly called the Swayze Pavilion, which was built in 1915. And it was funded by Ambrose Swayze, and it was designed by Henry Bacon, who designed the Lincoln Memorial. So it's kind of a big name. It's just beautiful. And when the band isn't there, please go to the bandstand and walk up into it and look at the mosaic work on the floor and the ceiling. It's amazing.
They're not all Exeter residents anymore, but I'm not an Exeter resident either. I live on the other side of the highway in Stratham. So, and our musicians come from all over the seacoast. So the sense of purpose in Exeter, I think Chick had the whole thing. But as far as the sense of purpose for providing live musical entertainment to the citizens of the community, we have a top-notch group. This group comes from all over. And it's not for the paycheck. It's because we love to perform together and share traditional music on the traditional quintessential venue of the Marble Bandstand in downtown Exeter. We are so lucky to have that. And if you haven't stood, I'm sure that you have, stand on the medallion in the center of the bandstand and whistle or hum or sing, and to listen to the sound leave the bandstand is really neat. It's cool. Playing on that bandstand for a live audience here in town with purpose, and we love it. There's nothing like, even in July, as the sweat drips down our foreheads and across our eyes and we're trying to read our music, to watch the sunset over downtown Exeter with the American flag flying over the town hall with the front porch packed with people that are just there to listen to the band is nothing touches it. It's cool.
And my aunt and uncle, I used to take them every year, Donnie and Buffy Bruce, and they both died this year, so I don't know, this year without Buffy and Donnie and without Chicky, it's going to be tough. But yeah, every year all of us from Chestnut Street will go over by the noodle place there, turn around for the last song and go, see you next June. So it's something we look forward to every year, and you get to meet everybody you haven't seen all year and have good friendships. That's what I like about it.
Well, I would encourage everyone to come out on a Monday night in July and participate, stop by. I have been fortunate to meet the nights that the select board meeting has got ended soon enough for us to enjoy the last couple of songs by the band. I've met people that I haven't seen in years, or teachers of my children, and to catch up with them and where my children are now and how my parents are doing. Questions that are the history of my family in the town, continue. And it was nice to hear people still asking about, did you know so-and-so did that? And did you know so-and-so did that? And it's a great part of the continuing tradition and the expansion of the tradition to bring people together who you don't know, and also people that you've known for years.
Well, there's not many communities that have a established brass band that's been playing for over 100 years. This has been a long tradition in Exeter, and anyone that really wants to know what a New England colonial town traditional band sounds like would be the brass band. It really is something that brings back good memories from past years, and I think it's a great tradition, and I look forward to that tradition and carry on.